This is Tell Me What to Read, powered by Booktopia. I'm Nick Wasiliev, and today we sit down for the first in a series of very special podcasts which will run through all of October. Every October, Booktopia celebrates Booktoberfest, a festival devoted to discovering the most exciting new and upcoming books. From fiction to non-fiction, true stories, food and drink, kids and YA, big ideas, life and style, and more. There is nothing that we do not cover. For our first episode devoted specifically to Booktoberfest, Shanu, Prasad and Sarah McDuling sit down with the one and only Myf Warhurst, radio presenter and the queen of Spicks and Specks, to talk about her brand new biography, Time of My Life. Check the show notes below for timestamps for the interview, and if you're enjoying our show, you can drop us a review wherever you are listening to our show. Now over to Sarah and Shanu's interview with Myf Warhurst, author of Time of My Life, which you can order in the description right now from booktopia.com.au.
Hi, I'm Sarah McDuling, and my colleague Shanu, Prasad and I are both super excited, and I have to admit, somewhat starstruck, to be here today talking with the amazing Myf Warhurst about her upcoming memoir, Time of My Life. Myf, thanks so much for joining us.
Oh, it's such a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Now, before we hit you with a barrage of questions, that was a bit violent, sorry. Before we ask you questions in a civilised way, would you mind just telling listeners a little bit about what they can expect to find in your book?
Well, the book is a memoir of sorts, but it's telling stories from my life, not in necessarily a linear fashion, but stories that have a soundtrack, I guess. Because as I was starting to write things down, I realised that every memory of mine has a song attached, and I'm not sure how. And the hardest bit was working out which song, because there was a million songs attached to all of these stories. So I've narrowed it down to one specific song per chapter and the stories that go on around that. And I guess it's like food memories. You know, when you eat something, you're reminded of when you first had it. For me, it's like music is the same. When I hear a song, quite often it transports me back to that time and that place. And I think everybody can relate to that. And I started writing from that perspective, and then it was so much easier. It all just started to come out. And I was like, oh, thank goodness I've found a device. This is great. But it's the most natural device for me because it's real. Like that's how I've always, I think, looked at the world, through that prism of music. And I got to finally do it.
I think that's so true, though, that smell and sound and things can really trigger your memory in the most visceral way. Like whenever I hear "You're the Voice," I am taken to by John Farnham. Like, just did I need to say that? Probably. No,
it's fine.
I am taken back to the swimming pool at Queanbeyan that I used to swim in when I was a kid, because that just used to play a lot there.
Went to a swimming pool that had music. You're so lucky.
Yeah. Yeah, the public swimming pool would blare music out. It had all of
through
these.
one speaker, usually the really tinny one, if I remember correctly.
I did not have that.
And you know what leads me to the same memory? Frosty Fruits. So like,
there you go. Well, when I heard You're the Voice, it was usually at a nightclub that I'd go to underage in the town of Mildura in Victoria, and they'd play it. It was the last song of the night, so everyone had to get out, and that's how I. That didn't make it into the book, but it was like that was when you do the passion dash, and you'd be like, "Oh, who can I pass before I go?" I know, not the most romantic song I would think for a passion dash, but it worked.
Look, honestly, I think at that age, probably any song became pretty romantic for anyone. You had the opportunity.
Yeah.
So there's probably many times during your long and successful career where you might have chosen to write a book, but you chose now. What brought on that decision?
I think it was the fact that I was in lockdown in Melbourne and I was stuck at home. I was on my own for most of it, and I think I'm approaching 50, and I think it just was the right time. It felt like I've come this far. I've got some fun things I want to share, and some tougher stuff too. But it felt like I could write it now. I don't know if I could have done this 10 years ago. I'm not sure I could have been probably as honest in parts or as open, but living in lockdown for so long and just really having to face myself and deal with myself, I felt, I felt confident, to be able to share things with people. It really gave me a sense of myself. It's very hard to explain, but I think I didn't have the confidence to do it up until this point. And look, it's not going to win a Pulitzer or anything like that, but it's certainly, it was a really kind of special thing I feel like I did for myself at that time, when that's all you could do was stuff for yourself, because you couldn't go outside for more than an hour.
It was just time.
Yeah, it was time. It's time to sit with myself. I think I haven't really done that in my life. My life's been busy and hectic like everybody's. And then all of a sudden it was just me. I was like, oh, okay, can I do this? And I tried.
Time in my life.
Yeah.
I had to, sorry.
Love it. Love it.
Was it hard to land on that title?
Oh, goodness me. I don't think so, because I was trying to get a song that represented one of the stories in the book, or at least one of the moments, and that just seemed so obvious. I mean, who didn't grow up watching Dirty Dancing? Or
not watching it if your parents were very strict.
Oh, yes, of course, because it was pretty raunchy, wasn't it?
Oh, yeah, and you had to sort of sneak into the lounge room while it was on. Still need the soundtrack, though.
Yeah, you need the soundtrack, and I love the soundtrack. So, that sort of made sense to me, because it took music from the 50s as well as contemporary music and in the 80s. And I grew up in the 80s, so everything I had in a small country town, everything I had access to was pretty mainstream. So it was kind of like Dirty Dancing was a bit left of centre, the not cool girl gets the guy. And I think I loved that. And she also learned how to dance, which I never could. So, it makes sense in the end that's one of the songs, because I think it's just such an uplifting and hilarious song. The fact that she gets carried over his head in that dance routine. I mean, I don't even talk about it that necessarily in the book, but with that song comes a sense of real pure joy, I think, and I wanted to convey that.
Yeah. I think that movie has brought that exact feeling to a lot of people over the years. It's one of those movies where you can just watch the last 10 minutes.
Yeah.
Or the whole thing. I can't carry a piece of watermelon from one side of the kitchen to the other without saying, I carried a watermelon.
I carried a watermelon. I know. But that was a song that Alan Bro and I had to do the dance, or at least pretend to do the dance to, at one of the Spicks and Specks live shows. So that was very exciting for me, because here I was being a theatre star when I clearly am not a theatre star in any way, shape or form. So, it really was the time of my life when that happened.
Now, Myf, we wanted to know if you would just do a little mini reading for us. There's a point, it's at page 11.
Okay.
I'm just, for people listening, have managed to bump my microphone while handing Myf a copy of her book.
Love it.
And we just wanted you to read out this perfect memory of one of your early musical moments.
Shameful musical moments.
It really sets a tone.
It does. It really does. So this is page 11, Time of My Life. Okay, so you want just from the top? Okay. Deep from my brown vinyl beanbag, which squeaked with every move, I arose, my chubby limbs seemingly driven by an unknown force. I walked zombie-like towards the telly, knowing full well that Mum was about to yell at me not to get too close because I'd ruined my eyes. I didn't care. I was being led towards a bloke named Darryl by a force so strong that I was ready to sign up to whatever satin and velvet-clad cult he was leading. I stood directly in front of the television, placed my hands on the screen, felt that initial buzzy electric pulse that only a valve TV screen can give off, then pressed my face on the screen and proceeded to pucker up, giving Darryl Braithwaite, resplendent in his daring satin pants, a big old sloppy kiss.
I love it so much.
Poor Darryl, it's a non-consensual kiss. He had no idea.
I think it's okay when it's through the TV screen.
I think so too.
I think that that comes very early on in the book, and you're right, it really sets a tone for the journey people are about to go on with you.
And what I loved about the book, I know you said, maybe not a Pulitzer Prize winner, but when I read the book, all I could hear was actually your voice throughout the whole book.
Myf, you must have spent a lot of time really communing with your past in order to delve into all these memories. And I wondered what that was like. Like, did you spend a lot of time going through your albums? Musical as well as photo?
Yeah, well, that was the hard thing. History's a funny thing when you look at your own life. Essentially, what you remember and what's real is very different, I think, for every person who's in that moment and that experience. So I really had to come at it from only my perspective in the end. I couldn't really rely too much on anything other than my own memory for a lot of it, because everyone's got different memories about all sorts of things, and it's a long time ago now, I hate to say it, with a lot of it. So yeah, it was I went through a lot of photos and a lot of music actually. Funnily enough though, all my music's still in storage, so I couldn't access it to look at and see what I had. It was just, all this stuff's etched on my brain anyway. I mean, anything from my childhood is just in there. Doesn't really matter. I remember the pictures on the record covers, and nothing goes past you when you're that little and you're that into it.
And the record covers are that good,
yes,
or bad.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Bit of both. I think that's what it was, good and bad.
I think so.
Yes, and that was the great joy too. Discovering that a lot of my taste, my formative taste, was pretty basic. I guess that's a term you'd use these days, because we didn't have a lot to choose from, because I was in a small country town, but also finding the genius and the joy in all of that stuff. That was a great thing to do too, and it was nice to look back and tell little Myf to, look at what you did. That was nice, because you never think about that when you're growing up and you're wondering if this is what my life's going to be. And then it was nice to have a little moment and go, all right, mate, you would have been pretty excited about this. Yeah, and it's nice.
You tell some great stories about growing up and the sort of childhood you had, which was a little bit like your family was a little bit different.
Yeah.
You did things a little bit differently.
Very different, yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about the time that you spent on what you call the block, being a blocky?
Yeah, being a blocky.
Which is not about the Channel 9.
No, it's not. Funnily enough, no. They've stolen that term from us, I think. Yeah, I grew up on we had a property, and it was up in Sunraysia, the area, Mildura, Redcliffe's tip-top corner of Victoria, is where the properties are known as blocks, not vineyards. So there's grapes on there mostly, and fruit and all that stuff. But so they were given out as soldier settlement, as part of a soldier settlement scheme, and they were called blocks. So everyone up there, you're not a winemaker or anything like that. You're a blocky, and we grew up around all of that. And we had a property on the Darling River too in New South Wales, and that was the first bit of interesting stuff that came into our family. Mum and Dad decided they'd buy a W-class tram from Melbourne, and if you've been to Melbourne, it's the really old ones that rattle down, on the tourist routes basically these days. But it was amazing that the local government were getting rid of them for $500 or something, and Mum and Dad bought one and converted it, and they'd sleep in one end, the kids in the other. The middle was converted into a kitchen, so it was like a caravan really, but it was an hilarious caravan like no one had seen. It must have looked like we'd come from out of space or something. This tram on the back of a truck being lifted by a crane onto Besser bricks on the edges of the, it's a desert out there. Like it's the river was green, but everything else was just scrubby desert. And so it was pretty bizarre really when you think back to it. But then also my parents were pretty, they're so sort of straight and conservative too, you'd be amazed. It just doesn't quite sit well with who they are, but they really took a couple of risks back in those days, and I love that, like that sense of adventure. It's like, oh well. And I reckon I've lost a bit of that sense of adventure, but going through and looking at my history, I feel like I'm embracing it again. It's okay to have bonkers ideas sometimes. They might just work. And if they fail, they fail. It doesn't matter. As long as you're not in any sort of disastrous situation. But creative ideas, it's important to have them, and it's important to experiment and have some fun if you can, if you're lucky enough to be in that position. And it gave me a bit of inspiration actually to take the next 50 years and do some interesting things like that. And why not? Well, if I can.
And then write another book.
And then maybe write another book. I don't know. We'll see how this one goes first.
What was the experience of writing the book like for you?
Oh, look, I can't say it was easy. I think I've talked about it more than and I'm sure every writer says this, they talk about it more than they actually do it. And you whinge about having to do it and not having done it. So it's just this constant cycle of, should get that done. Really need to get that done. But no, once I knuckled down, I was all right. It got easier. It got a lot easier. I found the early stuff quite hard to write because it was very, it was a long time ago. But then it just kind of got easy and clicked in, and I enjoyed it. Actually, now I'm removed from it a little bit. I feel like it wasn't too bad an experience. And look, like I said, I was in lockdown, so I didn't really have much choice other than to sit with myself. So it's probably the best thing I could have done at that point. So look, it's been an experience, that's for sure. I don't know if I'll do it in a hurry again, but I'm kind of proud of myself for doing it, to be honest. I don't know if other people say that, but
They should,
You
because
should.
I can't write a sentence, let alone trying to write however many sentences you have to make up an entire book. So I'm impressed.
Oh, thank you. But like, I don't want to say that to sound like I'm up myself or anything.
No,
I'm not, but
it's an actual achievement.
Yeah.
Especially writing about yourself. I think it's a lot harder to do that than it is to write
and it's like,
about someone else.
how do you make sense of all of a life? Like, how do you, and bring it all into sort of concise stories? It felt so big at the start. I felt like, oh God, I can't do this justice. But in the end, I just found a little way to get in with the music bit, and it got easier. So it was, I was pleased.
I think if ever there's a time to, be proud of yourself, it's after you've written a book.
Look, if it doesn't sell, I'll be like, I'm pretending it never happened, but I'm sure it'll be all right.
I don't think we have to worry about that. I wanted to also just ask a bit about, you talk a little bit about in the book about growing up at a time of what some might say is the best decades of music. And I'm not going to say which one that is, so that everyone listening can pretend that I'm talking about their decade of music.
Yes.
But let's just talk about
very diplomatic. I like that.
When you started in the music press, and is that something? Talk about how that sort of came to be and how you sort of started on this road to where you are now. Yeah,
it was funny because I thought I was going to be a musician, and I realised I wasn't very good. So, but again, it didn't hurt to test the waters in that department, and I would have loved to have been a musician, but I got too anxious. I couldn't play, so I ended up doing just more general studies at uni, and then always came back to music, came back to writing about music. I was doing gig reviews for nothing, I think, free tickets and beer if I got it, or they were $1 pots or something on a Tuesday night. And so it just came about through that, and I don't know. I think it was a great way to bring what I loved back into my life without having to follow the path that I thought I was going to follow, which was to be a musician or a teacher. I just realised I wasn't very good, to be honest. I didn't quite have it. And when you're surrounded by other people who are quite good, you can see it pretty easily. And I think it's important to see those things in yourself too. I learnt a lot at that time very early. Went, oh, gee, that's not for me. But yeah, it was, and then writing just took over, and then broadcasting from that, and then telly came from that. So it was just a gradual progression. I never planned it, but in some way it's always come back to music and creativity and wanting to share with people things that I love, and I mean, that's storytelling, isn't it? You want to share your experiences so other people can enjoy what you enjoy or feel what you feel or have empathy or whatever. For whatever reason you do it, I think it always comes back to that, just wanting to share stuff.
So if you could go back to Little Myf from chapter 1, Little Blonde Myf.
Yeah, I know, weird, hey?
And tell her, look, this is what happens next, and just lay out the next couple of decades. What do you think she'd say?
No, she'd say, no way, get out. No. Because, it just seemed like thinking back, that time, there was no internet. I mean, you two look like young, sprightly things. So
no, I remember the no internet.
Certainly, me too.
It's hard to explain to people, though, that haven't experienced that. And if you live...
No mobile phones.
You
couldn't go out and your parents couldn't find you.
I know.
Right.
Yeah, I know. That was actually quite good, I thought. But we couldn't access information like you can now. And I would never have thought that, I didn't go on a plane till I was 17. So, even getting to a big city was a big deal. And getting, like a CD that you wanted or a tape or whatever was a big deal. So, I think she'd be out of her mind. absolutely out of her mind about the possibilities that were there, because I didn't know about the possibilities back then when I was little. You just don't. If you can't sort of, it's all that if you can't see it, you can't be it.
Yeah.
And I didn't even know what to see because all we had was a telly and the radio.
No, imagine telling yourself when, like, your younger self, I'm going to be on a podcast, and they're like, what would that be? And you'd
What's
be like,
a podcast?
Just two people talking about the things they like and having everyone else listen to them doing that every week for a few years.
I know, it's bizarre. And that anyone would be interested. Like, I love it. I love it. Like, this little funny world that we've all created for ourselves, making podcasts and things that people enjoy. It's a pleasure.
I think one of the other parts of the book that I enjoyed so much was how you've really celebrated, and you talked a little bit about that before, but really celebrated a lot of the cultural sort of icons or cultural moments that we've sort of been trained to find a little bit, I guess, cringy, but really like embrace the joy. Like you talk about meeting Kenny Rogers, poor Kenny Rogers, with his little bit of
too much work in the 80s.
Not being allowed to, not being able to grow a full beard anymore.
Because if he pulled up, I reckon the hair would have grown from under his eyes because it was pulled up. So I love Kenny, don't get me wrong, and he's beautiful. He still looked beautiful when I met him, but it was
got
quite
a photo
different.
in the book.
Yes, it was quite a different Kenny's face to the face I fell in love with. But that's okay. Do what you want, whatever. I'm not here to judge. But yeah.
Is there anyone that you haven't had a chance to meet yet that you would like to, that kind of fits?
Oh goodness, I mean that's
still alive, I guess.
That's still alive, yeah. I mean, there's all the big ones like Madonna. I'd love to meet her just to be in her orbit and see
Are
that.
you saying that she might be on Spicks and Specks?
Yeah, well,
I doubt it.
I doubt she'd go in anything. I mean, I'd love to be in her orbit, or I don't know, just any of those sort of icons. It's nice to watch them operate. But yeah, they're often terrifying, and you don't get much from them because they're such seasoned professionals. Although I think I wrote about this in the book, the brief interview I did with Beyonce. There was like a moment where I got a glimmer in her eyes of like, I said, "Are you okay, Beyonce?" And she sort of went, like her eyes just went a bit. Oh no, you could see she was like not okay. But then she pulled it together as you would expect. But they operate on another level, those huge superstars. So you're lucky to meet them in the first place, but when you meet them, you don't really meet them. So
you meet their public.
You meet, yeah, exactly. And if you get beyond that, that's pretty special. But yeah, it's rare. So I don't have a lot of dreams of meeting these people because I just, it's always a bit weird.
So is it quite exciting now, though, with the Spicks and Specks coming back, that you get to meet sort of, I guess, the next generation of Australian kind of musicians and international musicians, I guess, as we're opening up the borders again?
Absolutely, and that's the joy of doing Spicks and Specks. It was always more about the people the young ones that were coming through and that bringing their music and comedy to a whole bunch of ABC viewers that would never know them, And we had such joy being able to do that and being able to do it again. I see that as the role of the show. It's for all of us who just feel like a little bit left behind, perhaps because culture is moving so quickly at the moment. Yeah.
My husband and I may have on this latest season had to Google a couple of times.
Oh, I
who
know.
are these people on the show?
I know. How do we survive without Google too?
I don't know.
Yeah, it's
waking up in the middle of the night going, that's who that person was, or having to go and find a teenager to go and ask them questions.
Exactly.
Or just having a better functioning memory because we had to.
That's true. That is so true. Yeah, the role of the show, though, is definitely to bring those people into the lounge rooms of Australia so people can, get in touch with what's going on still out there, even though a lot of us feel a bit swamped by it all.
Yeah. Speaking of bringing people into, or bringing the world into our lounge rooms, another place that you have done that is through hosting some might say the best competition in the world.
Oh yes,
which obviously I mean The Voice. No, I mean Eurovision. Sorry, I obviously mean Eurovision.
I love what you did there. Yeah, what a joy! I think I wrote in the book. Growing up watching SBS, that was my sex education essentially. Saturday night movies on SBS because there was nothing else, and you couldn't hire get a book from the library about sex or anything like that. You'd be laughed out of town. So SBS played a pretty pivotal role, I think, in a lot of country kids growing up, that's for sure, and even city kids, I think. And because the closest thing we got to boobs was boobs when you typed it in the calculator, you know, like
upside down.
Yeah, upside down, like whoa.
X-rated.
Yeah, exactly. We thought we were pretty cool when we weren't. So yeah, it was a real honour to be able to do Eurovision and host it because my goodness, what a ridiculous competition it is. It's bonkers and I love it. And it's everything I love about music, but just like turned right up to extreme volume, and there's nothing like it. But then sometimes it's incredible gems that come out of it too, that just you go left of centre stuff that works. And you only get that if everyone's throwing everything at it at once, and they really are with Eurovision. They just chuck everything at it. And I kind of love that too.
I like you were talking about a woman up a ladder with a horse head.
Oh my God.
I mean, it's probably not even the strangest thing.
No, it's not. But I remember that year, it was like, just remember what people are saying at home. This is not, don't be serious about this. She's wearing a horse's head up a ladder in a room where she's scrawled, you know, like wild messages all over in chalk. Like there's a lot going on here. Enjoy this.
Oh, Eurovision.
Yes.
Now, if it were up to me, this podcast would go for another hour.
Oh.
But we're sort of running out of time / overtime already.
Yep.
I have 2 more questions. I'm going to try and combine them into one question.
Okay, go for it.
Okay, so it's
I'll
kind
probably forget the first question by the time I've answered the second. So
it's kind of an either or.
Oh, okay,
or
good.
if you're feeling like it, both.
Great.
Now I'm really curious.
I know, this is awesome.
So the question I wanted to ask was, as the book is kind of like a collection of memories and photos and a playlist essentially of your life, curating that down, I think you mentioned at the beginning, would have been really difficult. So question A is, was there this is your opportunity to kind of add a little addendum and say, I would have loved to also include this song. If you don't want to answer that, if you feel like that's not you've got everything in there that you want, or B, too hard, this is that we love to ask people, particularly people, you know, with a reputation as a taste arbiter. Like,
Thank you. I'm not sure how I got that, but thank you.
If there's anything that you've read lately that you wanted to recommend to people listening. So you can answer both or one of those.
Okay. In terms of the playlist, to be honest, I was going to actually do a playlist of the songs and put it together to something you could stream, but I found it so difficult because it was just such a weird list. Like I was looking at it going, I can't put my name on that. That just looks like that's
frenetic.
Wild. Like goes from here to here to here to here. But that's the thing about music, especially stuff that is implanted in your history. It doesn't come from necessarily a place of choice. It's around you, and that's why it's part of those memories. So it wasn't something I could even put together as a playlist because it was so confusing when you looked at it on paper for me as a person who curates music and shares music and has done radio. I was like, that's just bonkers.
Life is too messy.
Life is too messy. So
now I think we should all do that. We should all put together a Myf playlist, as in one for ourselves.
Your own,
Here's
exactly.
my life in song, straight in.
Yeah, and it is. It would be a wild ride because it'd go from Burt Camford, Swinging Safari from the 60s, straight into, you know, Sherbet. Like, that makes no sense on paper, but when you hear it with the stories, it makes sense, and everyone's got that little weird playlist of their own. So there's lots I didn't include, but I feel like the ones I did include captured the feeling, an overall feeling. It's not necessarily about the song, but it's an overall feeling. So that's how I kind of got around that, which was good. Now the second one was any books that I've been reading.
Or music, anything you want to call out.
Anything. Oh.
TV show even.
I keep forgetting the name of this book. I just read it when I was away. You guys will know. Zan recommended, my co-host on Pot Bang On recommended it to me. It's a Japanese writer.
What's it?
I read like 20 books translated from Japanese in the past.
Yeah.
I'm not going to remember. Anyway.
What was it about?
It was about artificial friends.
Clara and the Sun.
Oh, yeah, that's it. Sorry, I couldn't even think of it.
Beautiful book.
Yes,
so beautiful.
beautiful.
I do love that
Yes.
book.
I feel really bad. This is a book podcast and I couldn't remember the
No.
title and I feel very
We
bad.
got there.
No, because I was like, oh no, God, I'm going to remember it either.
I'm like your worst customer ever. Oh, there's this book. It's got a red cover and
We love those customers.
Sometimes we're like that customer and we're the ones buying the books.
I loved that book. That was a beautiful little read. I highly recommend that if you like. It's a little dystopian, but I do love a dystopian fiction. But I don't know how I managed to get through it, but the Jonathan Franzen I found was Crossroads. I found far more delightful and intriguing than I expected to. I think maybe I thought I was a bit over him, but I'm not. And I'm looking forward to the
obsessed.
sequel.
Me too. I read the whole thing in the afternoon because I was
Oh my God, it's like 20 hours.
I know. I started and I was like, I'll just read a little bit, and then I couldn't stop.
Yeah. It was that kind of book. It was sort of.
But guess what? I also read your book like that too.
Did you? Oh, there you go. That's a good sign. Put me up there with Franzen, Jonathan Franzen. Thank you.
Single sitting reader. Keep reading until it's over.
If you want to be like other amazing authors, I was just listening to an ABC podcast this morning with Ian McEwan.
Yeah.
And his new book Lessons, which is all about a guy who his whole life and he does piano lessons. And Ian McEwan himself was saying that he wanted to be a musician and I think he played the flute, and then he realised he just wasn't good enough, and so he became a best-selling author.
Oh my goodness.
So maybe you
There's
could join
hope
a
for
little
me.
club of people that wanted to be musicians and then went, you know what, we'll leave that to others and I'm going to do a different path.
Yeah.
So there you go.
Aw.
Yourself, Ian McEwan, and who knows who else
Who
is
knows
out
who
there.
else? I'd say there's a fair few of us who realised we were pretty terrible at something that we wanted to be really good at.
That's life, right? Life
Isn't
is a
it?
series of realising that what you expected is maybe not what you're going to get, but it could be better or
Yeah.
just different.
Yeah, exactly. And that difference not worse.
Yeah.
No.
And a different pathway is not necessarily wrong for you. I think just stay open and try a few things, experiment a bit, live in a tram if you can. Not that I'll be ever doing that, I don't think.
Worked out well.
It did. Mum and Dad, it's a great idea of theirs. And it was really cheap. It was cheaper than a caravan.
Oh, Myf, thank you so much for joining us today. It has been a delight talking to you.
Thank you.
And for everyone listening, you can grab a copy of Time of Your Life by Myf Warhurst at your local bookstore or online at Booktopia. Thanks for listening and never stop reading.
Thanks to Myf Warhurst. You can order a copy of Myf's brand new biography, Time of My Life, right now in the description. Booktoberfest runs until the end of October, so be sure to go over and discover the most exciting new and upcoming books in every single category under the sun. If you enjoyed our show today, you can drop us a review on Apple Podcasts, a like on Spotify, wherever you are listening to our show. We want to hear your feedback. Keep an eye out for any upcoming Booktoberfest episodes, and until our next episode on Thursday, thanks for listening and never stop reading.